Chapter 15. A week had passed quickly, and Sawyer's birthday was only a few days away. The staff was buzzing around making preparations for the celebration. She would have two parties. One would be held in the Fey Realm on the morning of her birthday, and one in the ballroom of her home on the night of her birthday. A stage was being built in the ballroom, and it would serve multiple purposes. It would have musicians on the night of her birthday party, and it would be used by her on the night of her soul thing. Every time she saw it, she cringed. She and Julius spent every spare moment together they had. She spent her time with the other men every day and then dedicated the rest of it to Julius. Even her nights with Cassia had become shorter. Cassia hadn't minded, though. She was the only person who knew their secret and knew they may only have this time together for a short time more. Cassia knew that she would have time with Sawyer in the future and help them remain unnoticed by the others. Neither of them mentioned what might happen on the night of her soul thing, but Sawyer knew the conversation was inevitable. Even though they took careful measures to keep their secret, their absences were noticed. When they were around the others, the way they looked at one another was becoming suspicious. They tried very hard, but when two people are in love, the way they look at one another is strikingly different from the way that they look at other people. Their nights were spent under the stars in different landscapes. They spent all night in her room talking until the sun came up. Their entire world had begun to revolve around one another. The feeling was like a drug, and they couldn't get enough of it. Marcus finally approached Cassia about the change in their brother. "Have you noticed Julius acting different lately?" Cassia knew she had to walk a fine line between her brothers right now. "Not really. He seems a little bit more relaxed lately. Is that what you mean?" she asked, trying to skirt the issue. "No, Cassia, it's not. He seems different, and I've barely had time to speak to him. He is always going missing or telling me I'm catching him at a bad time," he said. "Oh, well, I know he's painting. It is something for Sawyer's birthday, I think," she said, establishing an alibi for him. "He's painting again?" "He hasn't painted since he was a child," Marcus said, stunned. "Well, I'm sure he's out of practice, and that is probably occupying his time. Do you remember how wonderful he used to be?" she said nostalgically. "Yes, he was meant to be a great artist. And it's a pity our parents stopped him. People may have been seeing his paintings in museums today if they had not," Marcus agreed. Marcus was content to let the subject drop after that. Any reminder of their parents' cruel treatment of Julius always soured his mood to talk. Cassia let out a sigh of relief. The secret remained safe. It was on the night before her birthday that Sawyer had to finally bring up the subject they had been avoiding. They were sitting in the garden on the same bench where just a few days ago they had proclaimed their love for one another. "Julius," she said, forcing herself to bring it up. "Yes, love," he asked. "It's time we have the conversation," she said gently. "Is it? Or can we just wait a few more hours?" he said, looking away. "It's time," she said, wanting to avoid it also, but knowing they must speak about it. "What would you have me say then?" he asked bitterly. "Whatever you're feeling," she said, not really knowing the answer. "Would you like me to tell you that on the night my heart will break? Would you like me to say that if it's not me, I will probably rip out the heart of the man that it is? Would you have me say that I would rather be killed than watch any other man touch you? Have you no mercy for me, Sawyer?" he said, and got up angrily. "No, Julius, I'm not trying to upset you," she said, wishing she had never brought it up. "How can I not be upset? You are talking about what I fear the most. I do not fear anything, Sawyer, but suddenly I'm afraid of losing you, and it terrifies me." She walked to him and slowly put her arms around his neck. She looked into his eyes and said, "You're all that I love, Julius, and I don't want to lose you. We must think of an alternative. We need to make a plan, because I cannot spend an eternity with anyone else but you." He slipped his arm around her waist and looked down at her. She looked so scared, and he knew he must find a way to protect her no matter what it meant for him. "I will think of something, but not tonight, okay?" he asked gently. She nodded her head and said okay, and then let herself sink into his arms. She trusted him to think of a way to stop what was coming. She would soon learn, no matter how hard you tried to hold on to a moment, Everything could change in an instant. The day of her birthday arrived, and she realized she had forgotten she would receive her full power today. She didn't feel any older, so it must be happening later. Julius was leaning over her when she opened her eyes. "Good morning. Do you feel older?" he asked jokingly. She giggled. "Not yet, but after I get through 2 parties today, I might." "When do you leave for the Fae Realm?" he asked. "As soon as I get up, which I guess I should start doing," she answered and sat up. "The staff brought up a box for you, and I have one for you also," he said and pointed at the table. "I'm sure it is the dress Mother made for my party. I'm to have a special dress for the ceremony," she said and got up from the bed. A Fae dress was a sacred thing. All the Fae were given one on their 22nd birthday, and every Fae had a hand in making her dress. On the table were 2 boxes. One was plain and simple. The other had ornate designs all over it and was stamped with the word Paris on it. It had a beautiful silk bow around it. She could guess which one Julius had brought for her. She opened the plain box first. In it was a beautiful pale blue dress. When she pulled it from the box and held it up, it shimmered in the sunlight. She could see tiny flakes of gold had been sewn into it. She knew it would be soft and flow in the wind at her ceremony. She also knew it had been crafted out of pure love for her from the other Fae, and sweet tears stung her eyes. "It's beautiful, Sawyer. You will look stunning in it," Julius told her. She turned to him and said, "Did you know I am the first Fae to have her 22nd birthday for over 3 centuries? Mother calls me a new bloodline." "No, I did not know that, but in truth until a few weeks ago I didn't even know the Fae were real," he answered. "Well, then let me be the first to inform you of this fact. I'm kind of a big deal," she said and laughed. Julius laughed and said, "You certainly are to me." She laid her dress carefully on the bed and then walked over to his box. She pulled the bow open and then looked up at him. "May I assume this is from you?" "You may," he said almost shyly. She opened the top lid off the box and sucked in her breath at what she saw inside. She gently pulled the dress from the box and was stunned. It was a beautiful red silk dress with only one shoulder and a long train that would flow behind her as she walked. It was truly something only royalty would wear. "Oh, Julius, this is gorgeous," she exclaimed, stunned by how beautiful it was. It made her Fae dress look like she was going to a barn dance. "Do you really like it? I had it made especially for you, because the most beautiful girl at the party tonight should have the most beautiful dress," he said, basking in the look on her face. "I love it, Julius. It's perfect." She leaned over and kissed him and said, "Thank you." He shrugged his shoulders and said, "Well, you are kind of a big deal," and they laughed together. After she donned her Fae dress and brushed out her hair, he walked her downstairs. Everyone was gathered to wish her luck, and all the girls admired her dress. She couldn't wait until they saw her in her dress tonight. She headed barefoot into the Fae realm, not knowing what to expect from her ceremony. She was, in fact, the youngest Fae and had never seen a ceremony yet. When she stepped through, she found Luna waiting for her. For Luna, it was the last time Sawyer would enter the realm as a Fae child. Though it broke her heart to see the child she raised grown up, it also made her proud. She thought Sawyer looked beautiful in the dress they had made for her. The gold shimmered even more in the Fae realm. "Oh, Sawyer, you look so lovely," Luna exclaimed with tears in her eyes. Sawyer twirled in her dress for her and said, "I feel lovely. We all made it for you. Each Fae provided one stitch in the making of the dress, and each Fae whispered a message of love into their stitch. Someday you will whisper into a stitch for your own daughter, so she will always know, like you know today, that you are always surrounded by love," Luna explained the secret of the Fae dress. They walked together to a clearing in the meadow, and Sawyer was stunned by what she saw. Every Fae in the realm was there, hundreds of them. In the beginning was Mother, and they all sat in a circle that kept wrapping around itself to create a spiral that was enormous. Each woman was seated, and all of them had a drum in front of them, except Mother. The drums, like the spiral, started out small and got larger as they spiraled out, until they were so enormous that they had to stand to play them. There was an opening in the beginning of the spiral, and Mother motioned for Sawyer to come and stand in it. while Luna took her place among the other Fae. When Sawyer stood in place, she noticed she was the beginning of the spiral. Sawyer looked around at the Fae and was in awe of the power that surrounded her. She looked up at Mother as she began speaking. Today we celebrate you, Sawyer. All Fae have come to sing and drum in your power. We will watch as the earth gifts you with your full power. To receive this gift, you must first know the full story of the Fae. Today I will tell you the origin story. It is the story of us, and now it must include you. Long ago, the earth had spun around the sun for years unknown, before first man walked on it. When first man came, the earth rejoiced and thought, I shall make them a companion, to show all men how to feel the energy and to embrace all the earth had to offer. I was the first Fae created by the energy of the sun and the winds and the ocean. I sprang from the life force at the exact age you are now, and that is why we celebrate you today, and this is why you received your power at this age. When I was created, I mated with man, and all Fae who surround you now are my daughters and granddaughters. They possess only half of my power, as they are the daughters of men. You and I, Sawyer, are the only full-blooded Fae who exist. I walked this earth with my daughters for millennia. We lived in the deep woods where the life force is strongest, and soon my granddaughters became scattered across the continent. We lived among tribes and villages. We lived as men built cities, and then they built empires. We watched in horror as they embraced violence. They took from the earth until entire species were destroyed. They cut down whole forests and cut deep holes to find minerals. They made weapons for their destruction, and when they felt the life force, they tried to harness it in unnatural ways. We had tried to teach them to embrace the life force and to live as one with it. Instead, all they wanted was the power of it and to use it for destruction. The life force, though, cannot be contained, and it must be allowed to flow freely, because it is all connected together. They didn't understand that the life force is meant for everything, not just them. I grew disheartened by it and cried out to the life force to help me. I couldn't go on watching men destroy each other and everything around them. I didn't possess the power to stop them, and I didn't have the will to continue to try. It was then that I happened upon a young boy in the forest I loved so much. He sat at the base of a tree weeping, crying out for someone to save him. I knew then what needed to be done. I would help this son of man, and so I took half of his soul. I gave it to the earth in this realm to keep it safe. We all retreated here, and it is here we will stay. Our time in the human realm is over. There is nothing we can do to help. When I was created, it was only of the silver light. That is our weakness. We cannot compete with the dark energy of man, because man does not recognize the silver light of the life force. That is what makes you special, Sawyer. You were created of both the light and the dark. You have both that flow through you, and your soulmate is no longer human. The children you will also bring forth will have your full abilities, and all of their children will also. Yours will be a pure bloodline, and they will all call you Mother. You are the new Fae, and this is your origin story now. We will no longer walk among the humans, but you and all that come from you will. You were the answer that I cried out for, and you must watch over the realm of man now. Man has become powerful and threatens to destroy the entire planet. You were given the gift of a soulmate, so you will never be alone in your long fight. You have been given everything I was not, and you must try to impart on the humans now the gift of the life force. You have been the gift of the dark energy. You have been given the gift of the dark energy. If you must stop them, you are the new Fae created for the time of man now. Now close your eyes as we sing in your power, sister. Sawyer's head was reeling from this new information, but she closed her eyes. She heard the first drum begin to beat. It was an ancient tribal melody, and then the second started to beat. Slowly, each drum began to beat one at a time, until every drum was in sync together. The sound was intense, and as soon as the last drum joined in, the first Fae began to sing an ancient Fae song in a language not used anymore that matched the beating of the drums. Once again, slowly, one by one, the other Fae joined in until the drumming and singing filled the realm. When the last Fae voice had joined in, she felt the ground underneath her begin to vibrate as the music called the life force out. She began to feel the energy of the life force, and the dark energy began to wind around her. It spiraled around her until the silver light and the dark energy became intertwined in their own spiral. Their strands began to reach for her, and she felt her body pulse with power. Her body began to swirl with energy until she was lifted from the ground by it. She was twirled around in it like a tornado. Mother stood and watched in awe. She had known Sawyer would be powerful. It wasn't until this moment that she realized the enormity of her real power. She watched the girl swirl in the air with the energies as she became enveloped in it and then began to absorb it. When her feet touched the ground, the singing stopped and the drums receded, starting from the back until they reached the first Fae, who stopped drumming last. What stood before them all was the most powerful Fae any of them had ever seen. Mother approached her. "How do you feel, Sawyer?" she asked. "I feel strong, Mother, and I understand now," she answered. "What do you understand, daughter?" Mother asked, confused. "Everything," Sawyer answered cryptically. They had all surrounded her afterwards to congratulate the new Fae. They then spent hours eating and laughing together. The youngest Fae had finally come of age. They celebrated a successful ceremony, and Mother did not try to question her again. She had been gone for hours, but in her own realm, mere minutes had passed. Julius and Cassia waited for her to return, while a flurry of activity went on around them. The last-minute touches had to be put in place for tonight. A trellis was being built all around the wall so the Fae could come and place flowers. She came through to find them both waiting anxiously. "Well, how did it go?" Cassia asked. "It went well. I'm a full Fae now," she said, not really wanting to go into great detail. Julius could see she looked a little sad despite her assurances of how well it had gone. He didn't press her for more detail. He knew she would tell him when she was ready. She looked sadly at Julius because as the energy flowed into her, she had understood. She had understood her purpose and that of her children. Her purpose could only be fulfilled with her soulmate. She had wanted to ignore the call when the time came if it wasn't Julius, but she knew now she couldn't. She must sacrifice her own desires because she and her children were meant to save the world from destruction. If she ignored the call to her soulmate and stayed with Julius, they would all die. She knew she must save them no matter what it cost her heart. She couldn't tell him now, though. She must wait. The days flew by, and before the time had come to get ready for the party, the Fae had come earlier and blocked off the entrance to the ballroom so she couldn't see what they had planned. As she slipped into the red dress Julius had made for her, she couldn't think of a time she had ever felt more beautiful. She had her hair pulled to one side and it flowed down her bare shoulder. The long train of her dress wrapped around the dress in a swirl, and she stood admiring herself in the mirror when Julius walked through the door. He had come to escort her to the party. He stood quietly in the doorway. Her beauty was breathtaking. He had seen many women in all the centuries he had lived, but Sawyer was by far the most beautiful he had ever laid eyes on. She caught a glimpse of him in the mirror and turned. It was her turn to be breathless. He was wearing a fitted black suit and had on a shirt that matched her dress perfectly. He wore a black vest and a black tie. She wished she could freeze this moment forever and quickly tucked it into that place in her heart where she would always keep the memory of him. "Julius, you look amazing," she exclaimed. "I can't think of any words that would adequately describe how you look right now. No words can describe your perfection," he said quietly, still lost in her beauty. She blushed. "Thank you." "Are you ready to make your entrance?" Everyone was waiting patiently for the guest of honor, he told her, and held out his arm. She took it, and they made their way out. As they descended the staircase together, she was delighted. The ballroom had been transformed into a dream. The entire ceiling was covered in tiny twinkling lights, so it looked like the stars were shining just for her. It had a soft light. Up the wall, tiny flower vines had grown up to the ceiling. The flowers were all yellow and white, and huge columns overflowed with hyacinths. Lucas was on the stage playing the piano, and all her guests were dressed in beautiful ball gowns, except the men, who all wore suits. All eyes turned towards her as she entered the ballroom. She looked at them with a beaming smile because everything was perfect. Lucas switched off with another Fae at the piano so he could dance with her intermittently. There were very few men, and the Fae loved to dance, so she saw little of Julius for most of the party. Toward the end, a giant cake was wheeled out, and after she blew out her candles and people were served cake, Cassie announced that they all had a present for her. They gathered around to watch her open the small box Cassie handed her. Inside, she was delighted to find a delicate little charm bracelet, and it had 6 charms on it. As she held it up and looked at the charms, each person claimed the one they had chosen for her. "The horse is from me," said Liam. "The music note is mine," Lucas said. "The chess piece is from me," Marcus told her. "The heart is from me," Cassia said. "The peace symbol is from me," Hunter said. "The flower is from me," Brexley said in her excited way. That was where the charm bracelet ended, and while it was beautiful, she wondered why Julius hadn't added anything. She looked up to find him but didn't see him. He had sneaked out quietly while she was distracted and gone to get her present. When she couldn't find him, Sawyer chastised herself. He had gotten her a beautiful dress, and that must be the present he meant for her. She spotted him coming in with 2 staff members, following behind him carrying a large present covered in drop cloth. They set it up against the stage, and she could see it was over 6 feet tall. The crowd turned to see what he was going to present. She stood in the middle of the ballroom, and everyone moved so she could see it clearly. "I'm sure you must be wondering why I didn't add a charm to your bracelet," he said, and she nodded. "I wanted you to have the image I have of you. It is how I will always see you when I have nothing but a memory of you to hold on to. And I hope in the future, when you have cause to think of me, you will also think of me this way," he said, and pulled the cloth off. Sawyer stood frozen, staring at the painting in front of her. It was them, and they were standing on the cliff edge, staring at the moon. She had her head on his shoulder, and his arm was around her. It was the first night they had gone there together. She knew because she recognized the dress she had been wearing. He had captured every tiny detail, and he had captured the sadness and hope she always felt there. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, and in that moment she no longer cared who knew she loved him. He stood there trying to gauge her reaction to the painting when a single tear fell down her cheek. In that moment she started walking towards him, and his heart almost leapt from his chest. He was confused by what was happening, but as soon as she threw her arms around his neck, he understood. He kissed her softly, and she said, "I love it, and I love you," not caring that the entire room stared at them in shock, except Cassia, of course. Sawyer turned to the crowd, not letting go of Julius, and announced, "I have only a few days left until my soul sings for one of you to become my soulmate. But right now my heart belongs only to Julius. You will forgive me, but until that night, I only want to spend my time with Julius." Then she turned and kissed him again. She didn't see the look of shock on the other men's faces, but she couldn't have cared because she only cared about the look on Julius's face in that moment. She might have to lose Julius to save the world, but she was going to make the small time she had left last her a lifetime.